Hi everyone, I'm Victor Owens, and we've been sharing in the family church in Barasatagi for the last 4 weeks now, and I've been speaking on vision and the purpose of vision. And there's a really good verse in Proverbs that says, it's Proverbs 29 verse 18. It says, where there is no vision, some versions say where there's no revelation, the people cast off restraint. They don't have any focus. They don't feel they have any purpose. And it's something that God has really put on our hearts, Liz and myself, just to encourage the family of God, just to encourage people who are Christians, to really ask God, what is it that God has asked them to do, so that you live your life with a purpose. We were looking at 4 aspects. Just over the next few minutes, we're just going to give you like a little overview of the last 4 weeks of teaching. But we've been looking at 4 aspects of vision. And the very first time that I preached it, I was preaching on the things that obscure our vision. So, for instance, I was looking at Luke. It was Luke chapter 24, verse 13. And it was the disciples on the Emmaus Road where Jesus comes alongside them. The disciples are sad, they're crying, and Jesus asks them the question, what's the problem? And they begin to explain that they have all these expectations, but they are feeling disillusioned. And Jesus comes alongside the disciples and he begins to re-envision them. It says that beginning at the patriarchs and the prophets, he begins to explain all the scriptures concerning himself. And the point that I was making when we were looking at the subject on that day was the fact that very often when you're in the middle of a difficult situation, you don't really see straight. And we need people around us that can re-envision us again. For instance, somebody like the prophet Elijah, a wonderful man of God, somebody that God used in an amazing way to turn an entire nation. When he was exhausted and in the cave, God comes to him and asks him the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah is feeling sorry for himself. He's exhausted. He's already done his utmost. He's run a long distance to get to the cave. And now he's feeling isolated, and he comes out with those words, I have been very zealous, and I really believe that I'm the only person left. I'm the only one that is serving you. And God totally ignores Elijah and recommissions him, re-envisions him, gives him a task to do, so that he has to go out and anoint 3 people. He has got to anoint a successor. He's got to anoint Elisha. The other person that we were looking at was Job. Job, everything was going wrong. He loses his family, loses his health, loses his finance, loses his cattle, his possessions. Everything is going wrong for him, and we know that that is a test of whether he really sincerely can trust God. And at the height of all of that, his wife says to him, well, now you may as well curse God and die, because she really isn't seeing straight. But we understand that somebody like Job really does have confidence in God. When he thinks he's about to die, he then makes that statement, I know that my Redeemer lives. And that though, worms may destroy this body, I know that I shall see the one that I believe and trust in. So that was the very first time. So very quickly, the second one was this. We were looking at a time in Israel's history when the prophet Samuel was leading the country. And 20 years previous to the scripture that we were looking at, Israel had suffered a big defeat. They had lost something like 30 to 40,000 men in one battle, and they'd lost the Ark of the Covenant. And they were feeling the effects of that defeat even 20 years later. Very often the enemy gets us to concentrate on the things that go wrong in our life rather than all the many testimonies of the things that go right. And Samuel the prophet stands in front of the country, and just as they are about to go to war another time, he puts a stone in the ground and he declares, this is an Ebenezer. An Ebenezer is a testimony. It's you beginning to tell people of the times that you trusted God and God came through and gave you a miracle. And he puts the stone in the ground and he says these words, thus far has the Lord led us. He's brought us to this place. He's won all our battles for us. So we're going to continue to trust him. And that's very important, because what Samuel is doing is he's re-envisioning the people who are concentrating on the negative things in their life. Very often, if God's done something for you and you find somebody who's going through a difficult time, you have to put your arm around them and you have to say to them, come on, I've been through this sort of stuff. It will work out okay. God can be trusted. The third thing that we looked at was Habakkuk. In Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 2, Habakkuk is having a difficult time, and he's on the wall and he's complaining to God. He's saying, I don't know why all these things are happening to us, and I don't know how all our enemies are able to come and overcome us. Good things are happening to bad people and bad things are happening to good people. God, what's this all about? And Habakkuk just makes the statement. He says, well, I don't know how all this works out, but I'm going to stand here on the wall and watch and listen. And as he does that, God speaks to him. And God speaks to Habakkuk and says, write the vision, make it plain, so that men can run with it. And you have to understand what it is that God has called you to do. We really should have defined what it really means to have a divine vision. And to have a divine vision is this. It's God giving you revelation. It's God speaking to you. It's God showing you now, today, something that you were made for. Maybe it's 20, 30 years away. It's like God speaking to Moses and to the children of Israel when they were still in Egypt and telling them all about Canaan. So this vision of Canaan was ahead of them. This vision of the land of milk and honey was ahead of them. And they had all these problems in front of them. The Red Sea, Jericho, all the people of Ai, all the enemies ahead, 40 years in the wilderness. But the vision was there so that they could see Canaan. And we should keep looking towards Canaan. This is something that we have to grasp as Christians, that God has a plan for us, that we have to engage in it. The last thing I want to say is this, is that in Acts chapter 26, Paul is giving his testimony of his Damascus Road experience. And on the Damascus Road, Jesus meets with him, and Jesus challenges him. Jesus is like a commander. He's not giving him choices. He's not saying you can do this. But Jesus confronts Saul and says, why are you kicking against the pricks? Why are you resisting me? And then he commissions him. He says, arise, stand on your feet, because I've called you to be a messenger. I've called you to be a light to the Gentiles. You're going to tell them the things that I speak to you today and the things that I speak to you in the future. So Jesus is commissioning him, and he's giving him a picture of why he's called him and what he's called him to do. And he's not giving him any choices. And I was saying to the people in the family church last night, God has a plan for us. He has something that you were created to do. It's not something that God made up this week or last week. In fact, when you read Romans chapter 8 says that right from before the beginnings of the world, God predetermined. He already had a determination. He already had a plan for your life before the world was made. And now he's waiting for you to begin to move in that plan. I really believe that you are not to serve no purpose. I really believe that God has called you, and you have to pray that prayer. You should not wait any longer. You should really say, Lord, I want to know the reason why you called me. What is it that you called me to do? When you read Philippians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul is saying, he says, I am determined to press on, to take hold of the reason why Jesus called me. When you read about Abraham in Genesis, God says, he says, I called Abraham that he may order his family to follow me, so that I can, everything that I spoke to him, I can bring to pass, that I can bless the world through him. God has a great plan for you. It's not just for you to be blessed yourself. It's not just for you to bless your family. It's not even just about your community or about the place where you live. But God's plan is always a big one, and it's about reaching into the world. And I pray today that God is really going to stir you up as you begin to consider some of these things. Maybe some things have obscured your vision. Maybe some things have disillusioned you in the past. But I'm here to tell you that God has a plan, and that everything that has happened to you up until this moment in time, all of the good things, all of the bad things, all of the negative things, all of the positive things, everything that has happened to you is all in God's plan and purpose to make you the person that you are today, so that God can begin to use you. You must live your life with purpose. Amen.